Production Town Hall. You can find us here each and every month discussing all sorts of audio-related topics, everything from music production to audio post-production to game audio and beyond. My name is Eric Berzins. I'm the course director of Project and Portfolio 5, and today I'm joined by RA grad Chris Stangroom, who is a sound designer and re-recording mixer based in New York. He's going to talk to us today a little bit about the world of doing audio for advertising and commercials. So how's it going, Chris?
It's good, man. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Can't complain. So you do all sorts of stuff. You focus on post-production and sound for film and TV. You've worked on a lot of TV shows, films, commercials, all sorts of things. I wanted to talk to you specifically about this topic because I think I saw you post online about working more on commercial stuff lately. So I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit about this topic because I don't think students get a lot of a view into that world. You know, we talk about sound for film and TV kind of generally and sound design generally, but we don't really dive into the specifics of the commercial world. So I thought you'd have some cool insights into that and how that's different and that sort of thing. So,
yeah.
I mean, you're mainly freelance, right?
Yep, freelance, and then my own. I have one company that I'm repped by called Sound Goods, which is a team that was based out of a music house called Yessian, and then they broke off doing post, and so they've got a great base of clientele, and I work with them quite a lot. So we do a lot of direct-to-production companies and brands and agencies and anything that's marketing, anything that you watch on TV where they're trying to sell you something, that's what we do.
Nice. And you, in your title, you said you're sound designer and re-recording mixer, so you're cutting sound, you're mixing it. I mean, like, I guess my first question is, like, what is your primary sort of bread and butter when you're dealing in the commercial world? Are you cutting more stuff? Are you mixing? Are you wearing both hats simultaneously? How does that tend to work out?
Yeah, so being based in New York, the advertising industry is kind of like a big part of the industry here. You can just exist in TV or film if you needed to, but a lot of people kind of span everything. And New York is kind of known as, whereas LA kind of, people wear specific hats in terms of roles. In New York, we wear a lot of them. And sometimes on a project, you're just one, sometimes you're a lot. In commercial, it can be anything. I sound design a lot of stuff. Usually if I'm sound designing, I'm also mixing it. It's rare that I'm kind of handing that off to somebody else unless it was part of a team. So like, for example, I've done big campaigns where we might be recording all of the voiceover or some pickup ADR or something like that for a spot. And simultaneously, the deadlines are just extreme compared to anything else that TV and film. And so you might have to get a lot out in the exact same day. So we might have a team that's doing Foley in one room, sound design in another, and just like flying it into me. So that way, at least we have a structure of something while we're playing dialogue. We try to do a little bit of it beforehand, but a big part of my role these days is mixing and sound designing and then recording, mostly remote, but some in-person voiceover and ADR type stuff as well.
So that's my next question about like what your working environment is. So are you working mainly out of your own home studio at this point? Are you working at a facility? How does that balance in terms of your working world?
Yeah, both, honestly. So a lot of the times for mixing, most of the time, honestly, remote these days. I think that also comes with the company that I work for and my history with the industry, because I've been doing it for about 20 years, is there's a trust there, so I know what it's going to come out with. That being said, so many people, creatives as well as audience who's going to actually listen to they're all doing on headphones. So the headphone mix is like really important. I work in 5.1 all the time. That doesn't mean that I listen in 5.1. It's just there because I've been burned enough times where we're working on a project and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, can we do this in 5.1? And nowadays, maybe a little bit easier with up mixers and different tools and quickly being able to route stuff. But in the golden era, back in 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, it was a lot harder to do that. And so all of a sudden you had to redo your entire session. And you never, in advertising, I'd say the number one key is not having any downtime. Like, if you need something to work and you need something to move, it should basically be ready. So there's a lot of preparation and a lot of like tech troubleshooting because they're spending a lot of money, and so they don't want any issues along the way. That doesn't mean they don't happen, but you do the best you can to avoid as much.
Are you mixing bigger just as a safety, and then saying you could always fold it down to stereo if need be, and that's kind of an easier process than going the other direction? Is that
Correct.
the mindset?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's now an expectation as well. A lot of the times, if we're working on something specifically that's broadcast, so it's going to be going to TV, out to the network or whatever, they don't. It used to be that we would ask, "Oh, do you need 5.1?" Now it's just an expectation. Like now it's like, okay, we're going to give you a 5.1 mix, plus all of the stereos. What's kind of funny about that maybe is that I'd say in every other medium, we do a thing which maybe the students know or not, is mix and splits. So we have our mix file, which is everything, and then we have our splits, which is dialogue, sound effects, music, and then you can break it out even further if you need to. But with commercial, usually in any other field, you do splits for everything, 5.1 splits as well, dialogue, all that kind of stuff. For commercial, we never do that. It's just a 5.1 mix. They get the mix, that's it. And then if they need to tweak it, usually they're coming back to us, which kind of helps with, growing business. And if they need to do revisions, they don't have the capability of doing that. So it helps to kind of recycle the work back into your pockets. Plus you have control over it, because the last thing you want to do is mix and spend, a lot of time getting into the minutia and really balancing something the way you want it to be and the way the client wants it to be. And then you hand those things over to an editor, a picture editor, and then they start adjusting things, and all of a sudden it's different. And so that can be a danger, and that happens, and it's a little dangerous, because then clients look, if it's sound related, they come back to you, and they wonder, hey, what happened? So you have to do a little bit of sleuthing to figure out whether it's an export issue or maybe it happened down the chain after you.
Like you said, you're only delivering the mixes, then you don't give them stems or anything.
In stereo, we do. Yeah, stereo will give them stems, because these days you're doing a main spot, maybe a 60 or even a 30, and then you're doing lots of cut downs. So there's 15-second cut downs, 10-second cut downs, 12-second cut downs, 6-second cut, like all of the socials. And so they want to be able to have that they can use. And even when they do that, sometimes if there's time, they're using your stems and sending it back to you. But a lot of the times they're already building those pieces along the way. But you just give it to them as an archival. So that way, a year down the road, if they need to redo something, they have all the files that they can use, and we don't need to go right back into the source Pro Tools session. But sometimes it's good to have on our end as well, just in case.
I think you kind of touched on it, the idea that I was going to ask if you're mainly working for broadcast TV at this point, or is it for web, YouTube, or is it all of the above? And it sounds like you're just having to more or less create the spot for all possibilities and then adapt it for each platform.
Yeah.
The strategy.
Yeah, exactly. I do a simple side of thing. I try to keep everything at broadcast levels, because my template and the way that I work is I used to have lots of different templates. I would have for specific TV networks, and then one for advertising, and then one for films, and it just got too much, because if you wanted to change one thing, if you wanted to change your main EQ, you had to change it in like 7 different templates, and it was just that's a lot, and it takes a lot of, you need to have downtime to be able to make those changes. So I made one kind of like master session, which to some of my my coworkers is way above and beyond, and I understand that, and that's okay. But it works for everything that I need, and I just remove things as I need to simplify. We also share sessions, so that's a really important factor within our company, and working remotely and working with a team. Is we have a lot of conversations about plugin compatibility to make sure we're all using the same ones, because the last thing you want to do is somebody works on a project and then they go on vacation and all you have is stems, or they just need to change one word, and just changing one word sounds simple, but when you don't have all of the files, or you don't have all of the plugins or anything like that, it's immediately more complicated.
Right.
So there's a lot of communication that goes on to make sure that we're all on the same page, and there's no downtime, no issues. That's the most important part.
So I frame to students, thinking more broadly in terms of sound for film. It's like, okay, in the film world, you're answering mainly to the director or a supervising sound editor. Those are the big wigs who you're going to be reporting to. But in the commercial world, like, you might have a lot of different stakeholders that you have to interact with.
So
like,
many.
like who are the main people that you in your day to day that you have to kind of interface with, who are like looking at your work and evaluating it and giving you feedback? Like, who are those people that you have to deal with for commercials?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit more, it's a little different, and it depends on project to project. Because, so usually you're working with a supervising sound editor, or maybe you're talking directly with the director in those situations. The director, a lot of the times, and it depends on the kind of project and how creatively driven it is, director is usually used in the production shoot, and then they're a part of the edit. And I got to tell you, like, more often than not, they are not in a session with me for post audio. The mix is not something that they're involved in. Some of the best directors that I have worked with in commercial are, because they care about it. But you have, like you said, you have so many people wearing different hats that it's important. So there's a lot of layers to advertising. If you start from the top, it's the brand and it's the product, right? And they've got a handful of people that are kind of keeping an eye on things, making sure that everything's moving. And they're not just caring about sound. I think that's important to state, that most of the people in advertising are thinking more big picture. So it's, how does the sound and the music work with everything else? They're not getting into the minutia that we are, but that's why they hire us. And then from there, you're going down into it. Usually you're going down into an agency, which is a company that has been hired by the brand to help them create the ideas for the commercials and then also execute them. So they might have creative directors, art directors who are a bit more visual, but they do have input into sound as well. You have the producers that are in there. You have copywriters who are mostly just, again, in charge of writing the scripts, so for anything that's word related, but they're also very heavily involved in sound opinions and things like that. So as you can see, there's already probably 5 or 6 opinions. And then when they actually need to make the production, they're using a production company. And that production company usually is where the director is. The editor might be involved with that. And maybe color, but usually that's also separate. So the people are kind of, I'd say, the hands-on people that are actually creating all of the work. And so they might have an opinion. The editor is been working with the director really closely. So there's a lot of opinions when it comes down to it. And honestly, the ones that make the decisions in the room when we're in person just depends on who's available at that time. And 9 times out of 10, you might finish in the room and then you post it up, and then there might be 5 or 6 other opinions as you go. So you kind of always have to, you finish and then you wait for it to be kind of taken apart, dissected, and then even within there might be a comment directly for sound, and you have to navigate. It's usually not directly directed at me. So there's a producer. Usually the person who's kind of my point person is an agency producer, and they're kind of a good one will say, hey, as we get notes, you might see a lot of them, hold off until I say go. And then they'll either sum up exactly what needs to happen, or we'll have a conversation to make sure the next steps are responsible. It's a lot of people.
So are you having to back up your session in stages, in versions then, to be like, okay, if they want you to go back to something you had done previously, or you have to have like different stages iterated and available at a moment's notice to jump back to something else if someone else decides
Absolutely.
Like something you did before? It's like, and how do you keep track of all that?
Yeah, I date everything, and I even get down into hours and minutes. So every single session, every day you start on a new project, or on if I'm working on the same project, every new day I'm going to save it with a new date. I think I will call out for anybody out there, please, when you're dating things, just because I've had to deal with it and it's 20 years of experience, I highly suggest putting the year first, then the month, then the date. And when it comes to year, you don't need 2026, just put 26. The reason that is so important is, for me, if I'm handing off to anybody, or if I'm not sorted by date modified or whatever it's going to be, if I'm sorting by the way the name is, when you go from December to January, it throws everything off. So if you start by year, it keeps everything in order all the time. I know that's so nitpicky,
Nope,
but
makes
this is
sense.
how these are the little things that save us headaches. And especially when you're talking about versions, what ends up happening is I do the same thing with the files that I bounce out and the exports that I give to clients. Usually, if I think even there's the remotest possibility that I'm going to do more than one version in a day, a revision, then I'll immediately do the date, year, month, day, dot, and then I work in 24-hour clock. It's just the way I've always been working. It's also easier because then I don't have to guess morning or night. And so then the hour and the month go in there as well. And so I can quickly say, oh, this one's from 2:15. Oh, this one's from 5:30, whatever it is. And it gives them a marker of those things. A lot of people, even my coworkers, they won't even put the date on there. They'll just put, here's the mix, here's Rev 1, Rev 2, Rev 3, which is another way of doing it. You'll find in this industry, whether it's, I'd say any creative industry, that everybody has a way of getting to the same place. And it's just unique to them, and that's okay.
Hopefully it's not mix final 1, mix final 2, mix final 3, final.
Well, those exist. Those exist too. Yeah.
So like,
Yep.
what's the turnaround time for you with commercials? So you mentioned it's kind of fast paced, and you need to do some things on the day of. In some cases, like what's your average kind of turnaround when you're working on something like this from a TV commercial, web ad, whatever it might be?
Depends on the content. If it's heavy sound design, it's going to be a lot longer. Sometimes maybe that will be, you sound design during the day, post a mix. Basically, every version that you're posting up, even if it's a rough, you're making it as final as possible. That's like so important to them, because sometimes they can't know whether something's working or not unless it feels as finished as it does. Sometimes you don't have the time for it, and so you just caveat and you say, hey, I'm posting this up. It's not finished here. I might put in a couple thoughts like, hey, here's where it is, but I think that I haven't really fully developed this moment yet, so there's just placeholder stuff in there. Sometimes you just don't even make a comment about it, because you never know. Like if you say, hey, I'm going to do more, but you're at your time limit, something to note, that you can just kind of skirt away with some stuff as well. Plus, maybe that's not even on the it's very easy for people that are doing specialty work, sound design, mixing, whatever it is, color, editing, to hyper focus on the creative aspect that we're working on. And so because of that, we sometimes will get lost, and we need those. That's why we have directors. That's why we have creative directors and people that are kind of overseeing the bigger picture, because they can kind of hone in on when you're getting into that place, especially once you start building relationships. So timeline, I can't give you an answer because
Varies too much, yeah.
There's no real, the traditional lengths for broadcast, which is kind of where things used to be, would be a 60-second spot, a 30-second spot, maybe a 15-second spot. That was kind of the limit of it. Nowadays, especially with web and even on broadcast, you might have, especially because you have things like Hulu and ads within streaming, they're sometimes much longer than any of those things. So you can have 90s, you can have 120-second spots. You can have the very short ones, 15/6s, those kinds of things. And within there, imagine something that's really heavy sound design in a 15 that we might have built from a 30 or whatever. You have to translate it down. There's a lot of little pieces that you have to conform within there. Sometimes it's just music. And so you just set a level and you're good. Sometimes pharma is notoriously, not in a bad way, typically, better word, music and voiceover.
Right.
And so there's a lot of importance that's put behind all the words and the clarity of it. There are legal teams behind all of these things, so they have to make sure that everything is said, it's not buried, because otherwise then they can get sued and things like that. So they're very careful about all those pieces. So hard to give you an answer
Like you said,
on a timeline.
Spots are just music and voiceover. So at that point, you're just mainly wearing the mixer hat, or what kind of editing are you having to do at that point, or just like you said, just clean up the voiceover, or
fixing the music. Sometimes a lot of music comes from libraries. We don't really work with composers too often. When we do, it's wonderful. because we can have a lot of flexibility. They can give us stems. You know, so a lot of the times we're working with a stereo music track that came from a library of some sort, and so we have to do a lot of creative mixing within there in terms of like we don't have any splits for any of this stuff.
Right.
So if there's something that's clashing with the voice, it's either turn it down or use spectral tools to be able to, you know, clear that space out so that the voice can be happy. And so, yeah, I personally, I try to find, because the advertising industry, some projects can be significantly more boring than others. And I think it's important to note that within those, I still try to find something that interests me in it no matter what.
Right.
Because I generally just need to be captivated while I'm working on something. And if that means that there's a tool on that project that is going to be really helpful for this, I'm going to really focus on that whilst keeping in mind, you know, the bigger picture and what the client needs and everything like that. As long as it's something that's going to help to tell the story and help to get the product out, or, you know, the spot out before the deadline, ideally, then that's always really important to me.
All right.
So let me say, a lot of the times we'll work on something where it starts in one day and ends in the same day. And that's really nice when you're working on TV or film for 6 weeks or a week or whatever it is. To have something that starts and ends in one day is a breath of fresh air.
It's like being able to go to work and go home and leave work at work.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it might come back the next day. It might come back at 8 o'clock at night. Who knows? But, you know, for the most part, like to see something through from beginning to end in the course of a day is very satisfying sometimes, where you don't have to wait for a lot of other things to kind of fall into place.
So I had one question about your client. So, you know, you've got the brand or the company that's commissioning the commercial. You mentioned some of the layers earlier as far as, you know, advertising agencies and production companies. Like, are you mainly being hired by the production company or the agency? Like, who is your client? Who's hiring you to do the work?
Again, depends. You're gonna get a lot of depends. It's so for specifically the company that I work with for commercials, Sound Goods, they're generally the ones hiring me. If it's their clients, then they're reaching out to me, and a lot of the clients that they work with are sometimes direct to client or production companies mostly. Agencies are still there, but the industry has shifted quite a bit, where agencies kind of have their own in-house facilities now and their own in-house teams, and so the landscape has been changing quite a bit over the last year. Sometimes it's direct to brands, sometimes it's director, you know. So like I did a project for the Art of Shaving, where the director is a good friend of mine, and they had actually already done the spot, but they had just done it as music, and then they wanted to explore a version that did ASMR. And so we did a lot of like custom recording for that kind of stuff, and also playing with the idea of putting the music back in, maybe making it more. The music originally was driving the spot, so it was kind of, it had this disconnect, so it was kind of like a soundtrack, whereas in our version it was, okay, how can we sometimes suspend reality in that way, but also can we put it into the space so that it's a bit more bringing to life that moment that you're seeing on screen. So that came from a director. I've done a lot of really cool like comedy, like test spots that are with directors or I do a lot of like stuff with director duos. Like I think that happens in the agency world, or just in the commercial world a lot, where two people just find that they work really well together, and they usually wear two different hats. There might be a creative director and an art director. The creative director tends to focus a little bit more on the writing, maybe the big picture of the whole spot. Art director tends to think a bit more on the visual side, but again, it's like skewing that way, but they're still involved in everything. Right. And so it's fun to work with teams. I think a lot of people get scared by that because now you've got two people you have to answer to, but honestly, when you're working in commercials, you're answering to so many people. Two people is like nothing.
I guess the related question is, you were talking about working remotely or working in a facility. Like, how many people are in the room during a mix and standing over your shoulder and giving you notes? Is it all on Zoom now, or do you have people in the room with you? Like, what's the formula? Like, how often do you have people in the room with you now? I guess as opposed to just being on a virtual call, standing over your shoulder. Is it multiple voices talking at you at the same time, giving you notes?
Yeah, sometimes it's both for sure. If we're going in person, they're definitely there. That's usually why they're there. Most of our in-person work, it has to do with recording voiceover. Maybe the talent doesn't have Source Connect or some form of remote recording capability. That happens. Sometimes we're recording. Sometimes the talent is within. It's not. It's part of the same company. Like somebody did a demo and they really love that voice, and that's kind of like, okay, let's work with that. Again, so they don't have a facility. But sometimes the mix is just a little bit too complicated, and so you can do it remotely, but sitting in person sometimes is just faster. Remote is great, but there's pluses and minuses to everything. If I'm highly focused on something with the dialogue and there's a problem, and I'm listening to it over and over again, unless I'm communicating what I'm doing, they might be like, oh no, that's too loud, that's too loud. And that's not even something I'm worrying about right now. I'm focusing on something else. So in the remote world, especially if you're fully doing it remote without anybody on Zoom, you can really get in, you can put yourself into a moment and stay there for much longer. So I think being in person gets answers quicker. It gets to the crux of what we need to get, like what needs to get done much faster. And then if we are doing it remote attended, we will have a lot of people on Zoom. It can be like 20 people. Most people will be muted, and you'll find that it's usually one or two people that are kind of running the show. And so they'll be kind of dictating exactly what happens. And then there'll be, you'll have somebody chime in. Again, they deal with a lot of legal stuff, so they might come in if they're changing copy, saying, "Oh, hey, careful with that. We do need to do it this way because if we try to change that line, it changes the legal side of things too." So that's something that is a factor. And then sometimes you have a hybrid of both. Sometimes you're in a studio with people behind you and people on Zoom, and they're checking with each other. So sometimes there's 5-10 minutes of communication back and forth between Zoom and the people in your room, and you're not even a part of it. You're just holding a talkback mic, making sure that everybody can hear each other.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the compressed time frames, I mean, as I'm compared to film and TV, how much are you able to do any kind of custom recording, or is it all just library cuts? Do you find that you're able to do any kind of custom work for these types of commercial projects, or again, is it just relying on sound effects libraries at that point from the sound design side of things?
Yeah, it depends on I look at it always as what's going to be the fastest. And then sometimes you have specific projects that you just know you're going to do custom. So like when I did the Sprite rebrand, that was a specific request from them where they wanted bespoke recordings of the products, of Sprite products, to be a part of the entire rebrand. So for that, absolutely. And I did like huge like multi-mic setups, not necessarily to use all of them, but to get the different tonalities, and some mics are going to be beefier than others, and so use that. I have a RE20 as my talkback mic. That mic makes it into a lot of mixes. My voice makes it into a lot of mixes, or whatever I'm going to record right here, because it's just super fast. If I need, a paper down, or I'm just going to like have somebody, like shake hands or something like that, I can record that super quickly, put it in, it's done. Those things sometimes, especially like Foley-ish type things, are just so much faster to record, and not worrying too much about how noisy it is or something like that. Obviously, if it's a super quiet spot, you have to keep that in mind. But yeah, you can bury a lot of stuff.
So it's not like a feature film work where you're hiring out to a Foley stage to do your cup downs or something. You're just going to do it yourself and knock it out.
Yeah, we've done like entire campaigns that are like not maybe like stop motion type things. I don't know if it's on there. There's some spots for Visible that we did that were really, really cool. and we basically fully recorded everything because it was so much easier to do that. And sometimes it's important to note that like Foley is specifically to screen. We did do that, so that's why I call it Foley. But there's a lot of stuff that you just record wild, essentially more field recording, and then kind of cut that stuff in as well. And the thing that I love about doing those things, and I try to do that more than reach into a library, is because you have this bespoke character. You have these sounds that are now so unique to the product, and I think that's a selling point for a lot of brands because they're trying to differentiate and distinguish themselves from other brands. Even if they're all doing the same thing, they're selling the same thing, they do it a little bit differently. And that's really important at the brand level to make sure that they have a voice. That's why we did Sprite the way we did, because they wanted to make sure there were specific, it wasn't just about the products, but it was about what their products represent in terms of refreshing and crisp and these kinds of things. And so we think about that when we're recording. You never think about like, okay, I'm setting the mic up for crisp level, you know, it just, but you think about it as you record it to try and put all of these like subtleties into it, which all add up into the bigger picture.
I do love the image of, you know, a complex multi-mic setup with just a Sprite can in the middle of it. I think that's a great image.
Well, hold on. Do I have that? I think I grabbed a couple of them. Hold on a second. I'll show real
cool.
quick. This one right here. Yeah, okay. So like specifically for that, nice. I grabbed those over here. So that way we had, oh, apparently that doesn't work. Here. Yeah, so you can see like there's a lot of microphones pointing at these same things. Like that's a perfect example of just the can and actions that we're doing within there, you know, just in like a little Foley room and everything like that. So yeah, it's really fun, and then you have a lot of exploratory, but even then you're going fast, you know. I prepare a lot for anything that I record, and I make sure that I have an entire list that I can check off, and then I organize it as much as possible ahead of time so that way it's just done. And so then that way we're just, as we're going through, we're just cutting, exporting files, making sure they sound good and they're at different levels for, you know, people to listen to on laptops. Yeah.
So on the levels topic, real quick, you know, when you mentioned you're start mixing in 5.1, you're folding down to stereo as needed. You know, in terms of target levels for different platforms, like I think you did mention it. You said you're mainly mixing to like broadcast level for everything, or is that true even for the stuff that's going to end up on socials and everything? Like, are you like the calm act for everything, even if it's online? Is that?
Yeah. For me, I'm usually mostly just so that my room stays the same. That's how I like to do it. I have settings with my setup here where I can listen at film level, broadcast level, and web level. And so typically I try to stay at broadcast level because that's just, then it's always the same energy coming out that I'm used to, whether it's TV or that. And then for film, I'll set that down. I'll listen to it to make sure. But usually, for me personally, I'm usually mixing web to about like -17 LUFS these days. And I know like YouTube actually takes it and normalizes it, I think to 14.
Yeah,
it might be
-14, yeah.
Yeah, 14. And so even when I'm doing to 17, I'm using like a WLM Plus, where I really love that because it's got the brick wall limiter. I always do a half dB under whatever the ceiling is supposed to be. So I do like -2.5. And I crank it up from my broadcast, I think plus, I don't know, what, +7, plus 24. I'm usually doing broadcast around, like we have a window of like 22 to 26, but I kind of like live in like the 23 realm because I don't want to be right on 22, and it won't fail in the commercial world like it will in TV. Like they'll actually like have a QC department that will fail you because it's out of spec. In the commercial world, they won't really, but we try to stay within that realm, especially for deliveries. So, you know, 23 plus 7 is 17, 16, something like that. Yeah, I can do math.
Like so for students who don't know, like the CALM Act is like legislation that says like commercials and programs on broadcast TV have to be at a certain level. Like, you know, and that doesn't necessarily, am I correct, that doesn't really apply when you're dealing with web content, right?
No, that's the Wild West, man. It's just whatever you want, essentially. But thankfully, YouTube by YouTubing, you normalizing it, it's very helpful, you know. So that way, I mean, ideally everyone's kind of mixing to that level, because there are problems if you know, if someone's pushing out of their, you know, video edit Premiere or Resolve or whatever it is at, like, you know, what the LUFS would be like minus 27 at like film levels, it's going to slam into a limiter, or, you know, it's just going to be problematic, you know. Or if they're going way above that, then there's issues that are going. So the closer you can get it to be where it's going to play, I think the better. I don't know why. I'm trying to think of like why we don't just go to minus 14. I think because it's just like we just don't want to keep going louder and louder and louder forever, because it's just not worth it. Really, for me, what we said before I was at Sound Goods and I ran a company called Hobo, I was working with a lot of like really great sound designers, and we kind of netted out at minus 17 purely because we felt that that level, when played out of a laptop, was the right level, kind of like, you know, the middle level on your speakers. When you're turning your laptop up and down, if you set it into the middle and you played, usually around minus 17 was kind of like, oh, this feels good. So if somebody likes to listen to it louder, they can. If somebody thinks it's too loud, they can turn it down.
That makes me feel good, because that's what I settled on myself for my personal stuff. I'm like, I don't know, minus 14 for YouTube just feels too loud. It's just,
Yeah,
so that's good. Cool.
Exactly.
You brought some sessions and stuff to show as well, didn't you? Like, can we take a look at your template for?
Yeah, we can look at the template. Yeah, I didn't bring any sessions. I was trying to open one up, and, you know.
Well, I saw Pro Tools open. I wasn't sure it was a session or a template. Or
yeah, it works 80% of the time, technology, and so today it was 20% of it wasn't happy. So I can roughly go through this, and you stop me at any point in time, because luckily I didn't have a second cup of coffee today. Otherwise, this would be a 3-hour meeting. And I know there's hopefully some questions, but this is a full template of like TV, film, and commercial. And I think it's important to state that anytime you generalize something, it's a starting point, right? So there's always things that are going to change. So for me, there's always video and guide here. I do a lot of cuts tracks and scene tracks. That doesn't really exist in commercials. I do cuts usually if I have to sound design backgrounds and things like that. I can automate it using like HAL Audio's Cut It application, which is a fantastic
I don't know
tool.
if you're thinking you're screen sharing. We can't see it.
Oh, you're right. Thank you. Boom.
Now we can see it.
Now we're in it.
Cool.
Yeah, now we're in it. So these are my scene and cut tracks, video guide. These get duplicated as you get versions. Like I've had this at like V11, V12, because you just have so much. Again, this probably is a little bit more film oriented, but you never know. Like I just have spotting tracks as I'm talking to creatives, and you know, I might want to select something and clip group it or whatever it is and name whatever it is. Just quick ways of doing it. Some people drop markers. That's fine too. There's no real rhyme or reason. This record track is for voiceover. So, and there's a lot of like routing that I'm doing within here, which I won't get into because routing is kind of independent per room or studio that you're working on. But typically when I'm here remotely, I'm coming from SC, which is Source Connect. And then that's routing back out to Zoom. So that way, for example, if you guys were the client, I could listen to everybody from Source Connect. I could send it back out to you, and then they're routed in some more tracks further down, vice versa, so that you're going to them. And so everyone can be happy and hear each other. Nice. This is my playback track, so it is specifically to go to not just you, but also back to them as well, which this is a mono for Source Connect, so I'd unbypass that and it would go back to, so the talent could hear it back as well. Selects and alts, again, this is for voiceover, so as I'm kind of recording different things, I'll select what it is and I'll pull it down into select, so that way I can kind of match it. One thing that we haven't really talked about is beyond Pro Tools, I'm usually working off of like either an iPad or I have paper scripts, and so we are like notating full scripts like all the time, because I like to provide those scripts back to the either the editor or just the agency in general, so that they have a record of it. So if they feel like something's not really working, they can listen on their own to different alts, because maybe we recorded the same line 45 times. That's happened. And so that's important. So we're doing a lot of that as well. So it's not just Pro Tools. We can drop markers, we can do all that kind of stuff, but you have to find ways to communicate with the client as well.
And have a common terminology. Like, I mean, I guess that's one question.
Yeah.
Not to sidetrack you from your session too much, but you know, communicating with agency people or people from the company, like they're not audio people. You don't necessarily speak the same language. Like how
Not at all.
like how are you able to try to bridge that divide and make sure you can communicate what they're looking for and translate that into something audible?
That's kind of the skill that you find over time. And sometimes I think the biggest thing I've ever like learned is just ask questions. You know, knowing what you gain in experience is knowing which questions are the right questions to ask and when, because sometimes people are just overwhelmed and they just can't, you know, there's just not enough time for that. So at that point you have to use your best judgment to figure that out. But yeah, a lot of the times it's a little bit of guesswork, or it's, you know, I've had clients that are like, oh, there's not, I'm losing the bass in the voice. And in the end, it was presence, which is high frequencies. Bass to us is low frequencies, body, like really low. And that's not what they were talking about at all. And so it takes asking questions and asking them to clarify a little bit or whatever it is. So yeah, that's a good question.
If they ask to make it more orange or something, then you're in trouble.
Oh, that's like 350 hertz, like pretty much every time. No, I'm just kidding. If you keep going down, I added this recently, which is stems tracks. So a lot of the times, if somebody else provides me stems or I get them from somewhere else, these are set up and they're routed accordingly. Like these are again all routed to the right spaces, so that way they'll still be included in my splits when I make them. But it's really helpful to make cut downs, or like when I worked in promos, it was really, a lot of the times what you'll do in promos is you'll have the voiceover throughout the entire spot, and then you'll have 30 different versions of on Friday, on Thursday, at 6 p.m., at 7 p.m., at 8 p.m., all that kind of stuff. So what we do is we would basically make a mix with everything that was going to stay the same every single time. And then essentially, you know, if the mix was from there to 30 seconds, of course I probably did. Let's see, here, yeah, if that was it and you had it, then you could duplicate it however many times you did, and then you would just replace, you know, the voiceover here. And so all those different pieces would just exist at the end. And then what you could do is an offline bounce of just these, and it's just a really quick way of like doing all of it. Come here, you know, your bounce would essentially look like this. You come down here, okay, cool. Now you've got all your different versions, and there's even faster ways to do this, but now you've got all your different new mixes with these like tags, we call them, included. Anyway, so the stems make that really helpful to do that. And then you get into food groups, VCAs. These are like, I got a lot of VCAs. These aren't even all of them. These are like the big master global ones. And you'll see, you know, all VCAs, this is how you can just turn things up and like globally, everything up and down. Reverbs. This is really important for like the end of a 30-second spot. So like if you're here, what we'll do is we might like pull that down and then do like this. So that way we know after it hits 30 seconds, there's no like reverb tail. If you leave it like that, then as soon as the 30 seconds is up, it pops back on, and that can cause some pops and some issues and things like that. So we keep this here mostly for that. So I'm not usually changing global or riding this with automation. And then you have, you know, music, voiceover, dialogue, effects, backgrounds.
Do you do a lot of backgrounds in commercials? It seems like it's more.
I'll skip ahead a little bit. So you have big food groups. You can ignore these. These are more for TV right here. Music, effects, and dialogue, and then M&E. So we can do dipped and undipped in the TV world. But if you hide that, then you just look at these food groups right here. Voiceover, music, interviews, dialogues, sound on tape, which is like archival. PFX or NATS. The reason I was coming down here, though, is because I have BGs here. But a lot of the times in commercial, what I tend to do is I have a few different groups. I have OMF, or AAF, which OMF is a bit of an outdated
Yeah.
terminology, but it still comes up. It's still we still receive OMFs depending on who you're working with. But then I started a lot of commercial sound designers and mixers will not have food groups for their sound effects. A lot of them will just have sound effects, and that's it. I worked on a really cool spot that's on my website. I'm not going to play it now, but you can check it out. Let's see, is it on here? Yeah, or maybe it's in commercial. Will actually say what it is. All athlete BAM connection. You can check that out. It was nominated or shortlisted, I think, at AICP. And someone else actually sound designed it. It was one of the few projects that I wasn't involved with the sound design, but I did add some stuff too. They were a film team, and they brought me a bunch of different food groups. And in the end, I personally, especially if I'm responsible for sound designing something, it's really helpful to have it because I can also, these are my record tracks down here, mostly stereo. Again, like I said, 5.1, I pretty much just give them a mix. I've got all of the options hidden back here, and you'll see, it probably is too small, but you'll see in here, like there's effects A through J, and I've got, right now, this is just A through D, because typically in commercials you don't need more than that. But it's nice to have that option so I can bounce like different like food groups out for editors if they need it, or just for my own satisfaction, or if I need to tweak something. But the other thing it does for me, which I find really helpful, is it gives me like quick reminders of things to think about. So for example, like if I'm working on a commercial, and I'll expand this a little bit. Group A, I pretty much always keep as whooshes, hits, builds, and stings, which are a bit more like less on screen and more abstract. And so a lot of the times we'll use a lot of those things. There's a lot of like designed layers. But each project is going to kind of lean into one of these food groups, usually a little bit more than the other. And obviously you can change it to be whatever you want. Sweeteners designed are going to be things that don't really it's like using a cat growl for like a car engine or something like that. Like I'll kind of put that in there, even though it's not fully designed, but it's a sweetener and it's not actually the thing. Natural is pretty much like anything that's Foley or anything that's like a cat meows. You need a see a sound, hear a sound kind of thing that lives there. And then graphics UI is really good too, because there's so many products and things that are out there where have little pop-ups and things like that. This is a quick way to remind yourself of like, hey, think about these, or like, oh cool, like I did this whole spot. Are there any whooshes, hits, builds, stings that I can add into it that might be really exciting, that'll help a moment build? And so my long way of getting to, I also have backgrounds here, but 9 times out of 10, one of these groups just becomes Bee Gees. Or maybe that's just Sweetener's natural here. Sometimes, honestly, we'll also, depending on your speed, sometimes I might just open up a folder in here and I'll just build everything in Group A, because it's just, you just got to get through it. The organization doesn't matter at that point. If you're mixing and sound designing at the same time, typically this is what you're doing. It's great to have them separated, but separating things and organizing things takes more time. Right. And so you have to weigh time versus efficiency in this industry specifically. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, otherwise, the other food groups, I'd say the only unique things I'd put out here is voiceover. One thing I do sometimes is parallel compression on the voiceover if it's a really aggressive spot. And so I might, I'll do some really extreme stuff in here and compress like the hell out of it, and then kind of just so that way I can kind of push it back in, and it really helps to stand above like really powerful backing music tracks. The music, the thing I would point out on here again. So yeah, I keep it simple because I know I'm going to duplicate these over and over again. I've got my main music tracks here, and then I've got 3 different sets of score and source. This never exists in commercial. Like it's just cool. Here's a bunch of music tracks. We're going to work off of those. And then I've got some up mixers. Everything goes to these up mixers. And again, source, score, all these things.
Like you were
they
kind of
can
talking
get
about
hidden.
how you mainly just get two-track mixes or something for music in most cases. I mean, are you getting
Yep.
any higher up people becoming aware of like the AI stem separation kind of stuff that's coming out as far as having that ability? Are you getting any kind of like external pressure to like, hey, we know this technology exists, can't you split this out or get rid of this element in the music or anything like that? Have you experienced that
Yeah.
yet?
Yeah, definitely have. I'm new to spectral layers, but it's one of my favorites.
We have about
RipX I've used
5
for a
minutes
couple
left
things as
without any
well, especially
questions.
for music, specifically for music stuff, because that's really wonderful when it comes to it. I think spectral layers is kind of like the next iteration of like what Isotope RX did for our industry, in terms of being able to change what we could take out and what we could keep in. Spectral layers is like taking that to an even further level, which is amazing. So yes, I am getting that, but which is, and if they want to request those things, that's fine. It's just like the conversation then becomes, listen, that's fine, but it's going to take us longer. And if it's going to take us longer, you're going to pay me more money, which is a good thing sometimes. So, but at the end, for me, you're always trying not to let the client shoot themselves in the foot, and you're weighing the options. So I'm like, yes, we can do that. I might be able to do it a different way. That'll be a little bit, that'll get the job done. And usually, you just kind of need to show examples. So before you go really far down one road, you, even for sound design and things like that, we're trying to give them some examples. That's important. So the only other thing I'm thinking, dialogue is dialogue. It's just lots of plugins on chains and things like that. Again, I've got interviews separated, so like, my coworkers at SoundGoods, they're like, cool, these are what we're looking at. We're looking like 8 tracks. I'm like, cool, that's fine. And so that's what I do too. Again, this is built so that way I can quickly,
They're just
hide and
hiding like
inactivate
80%
stuff.
of your template.
Yeah, I'd rather spend all my time doing that early on than adding stuff in,
Right.
because adding just becomes a headache. Yeah, other than that, then things get routed. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yep.
So thanks so much, Chris. I think we're just about at time. You want to shout out your website? We looked at your website a second ago. If
Yeah.
students want to check out your site, what is it?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 sites. So you have stjsound.com. That's my site. It's got a bunch of my commercial work on it, and all, as well as my like TV long form, what I kind of offer and everything like that. And then I'll also give you a shout out to soundgoods.tv. Yeah, they're amazing, wonderful people, really, really talented. We've got incredible like producing team, which I think is really important, and you need to denote that is because just because I'm sound and I'm an engineer, you need these extra people to to let me see, meet our team. You need an Angelina and an Acacia to help wrangle so many of the other things that are happening in the background, because there's lots of other projects that are happening while we're in the middle of another project. And so they need to help with that. And so it really does become a team effort when you're a one person, operation, that obviously you are limited to exactly what you can do as one person.
Right.
So it's good to have a good team on there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, great.
Soundgoods.tv,
Good. Sounds
stjsound.com.
good.
Yeah, baby.
Nice. Well, thanks so
Exactly.
much for joining us, Chris. Great insights into the world of audio for advertising. Great information. Thank you, Chris. Thanks so
Awesome.
much for
Thanks, Eric.
joining us. And for anyone watching, you can find us here each and every month discussing new and interesting audio-related topics. Remember, if you miss one or you can't watch it live, you can always watch the archives on our YouTube channel for the audio production town halls. And thanks so much to our crew for running everything, and see you around. So thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah.
Wrap
Thank
things
you,
up.
guys.
Have a good one.